I think an eradication of religion will help.
No! Okay, wait!
Hello everyone, welcome back to me, myself and Ife. It's Ife here, and we're back with another episode of Classroom Convos. So we're just going to introduce ourselves and our degrees. As always, I'm Ife and I do maths and economics.
I'm Nadine, I do economics.
I'm Waz, I do film and literature.
I'm Dan, I do philosophy.
I'm Timmy, I do biomedical science.
I'm AJ, I study philosophy, politics and economics.
Right, so today we're going to be discussing toxicities of traditional African or Caribbean or Afro-Caribbean mentalities. We're going to discuss religion or like attitudes towards mental health and just kind of anywhere that the conversation leads. Let's start with mental health. So traditionally, without being too generalised, the attitudes towards mental health in a lot of Afro-Caribbean communities is quite negative. It's something that's not really discussed or spoken about in the open. So what do you guys think about that?
But I get where you're coming from, like completely. I think because I'm coming from a place where my African side, my mum was born and raised here, so it's like I'm not getting that first generation first experience, right?
I think that one of the reasons why in African nations that mental health is something which is not given as much attention is because a lot of these African nations are patriarchal. Now, with patriarchal societies, we see that there's a lot of hyper-masculinity, and the acknowledgement of mental health issues is to some extent for males in particular emasculating.
I think it's that, and also just lack of like knowledge,
Education.
That's like a big thing, especially if we're talking about traditional African communities. They don't have PSHE, right? In like, do you know what I mean? So they're not like, that's not a topic of discussion like ever. So I think that's probably why as well.
Just to jump in, I think like for a lot of first-gen parents, like, do you kind of empathise with them a bit? Because like, I mean, you think about it, like maybe they've come to this country, right? It's hard enough. It was hard enough at that time to get into the country. They've maybe raised their kids, and they're doing everything to kind of put a roof over that child's head and feed them and take care of them. And you know, like with a lot of African parents, that's the way they show their love. It's not necessarily like by like actually,
saying I love you.
Yeah, exactly. It's just by taking care of their child. And so like, with their child to then go and say, oh, I'm depressed, it's kind of like,
It hurts.
yeah, it's kind of like, what are you doing? I've fed you, you have somewhere to sleep. That's the way they see it, but obviously like...
They're looking at it in comparison to...
Exactly, and maybe they've been strong enough to kind of like deal through hardships, but like, you know, their children might not be, so I think sometimes it's hard for them to kind of resonate and empathise.
On a superficial scale though, I think it's harder for, from what I see, it's harder for African children to just speak to their parents about their feelings in comparison to other counterparts. So I think that plays into a lot of why mental health isn't necessarily taken as like seriously in our community, because it's much harder to just generally talk to your parents.
Yeah, just drawing off like all those 3 points, I think Nadine's point on education, I understand like a lack of education being the initial reason why you don't understand it, but I feel like, especially coming over here, obviously there is a culture clash, and what Waz is saying about this openness with maybe white or Caucasian families. And when you're coming to this country, like it's not just good enough to say, back home we did this, because we're no longer back home, and your kids are going to be going to schools with people who've grown up here. And so I think that conversations need to be had and balances need to be found.
But do you think that these African parents will actually be able to break the mold?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so the reason why I say that is because hypermasculinity is embedded within this culture. So do you think the fact that they're moving to a Western nation, they're now going to be like, okay, now let's take a more sensitive route? Because of the African families I know, they're more likely to stay with their tradition than take a more sensitive route, because that's what they know. And I can't actually blame them for that, because that's all they know. That's what's ingrained in their brain.
But I'd say as they do, you know, live in Western cultures, they do tend to take on parts from what Western cultures do. And if we're being like general, white families do often encourage openness with their children. So the fact that they're seeing that.
What did you say?
I said too much. Cut that.
As they, you know, mix with white culture, they will probably take on parts, and they'll unlearn that sort of hyper-masculinity.
I understand though, it being what they know. I'm not saying you should like unlearn everything, because obviously there is beauty in tradition and beauty in culture. But when these are mentalities that were in England before it had to be unlearned in Western society as well. So I think saying, well, it's what they know, I don't really think it's good enough, essentially.
There's no right way of parenting, and like no model is perfect, right?
Yeah.
I was saying, yes, we can, like African parents can change, but it takes time, right? So like, for example, my grandma, rest in peace, bless her soul, she, at first when she came here from Sierra Leone, she brought us mental health. Like, my auntie struggles with mental health issues, and it was just, that wasn't anything that was discussed. She just left the house for a bit, and that was the kind of thing. 20, 30 years on now, it's something that we like work with as a family, and that we understand, you know what I mean? So that's what we're saying, like, things can change and evolve.
But do you think that's anomalous?
No, because why? Because when you're in an environment, you take on people's different traditions, and it becomes a mix. It becomes a mix of what you have and what you.
And that is not necessarily a bad thing. We have to, within the black community, within our culture, accept some things outside of our culture which can actually benefit us.
And obviously, likewise, other cultures can adopt some of ours.
Exactly, like discipline.
A child can hold a chair for 2 hours.
My brother, there's like 7 years between us. So obviously, once you've had a child and then you have a child 7 years later, you're lazy. And I can just see a huge difference between me and my brother, and I tell my parents all the time. So I think discipline is definitely something that is positive.
I just want to bring in a more scientific approach to it. What's going on when we have mental issues? What's going on internally? And a lot of the time, African Caribbean communities will say that there's something wrong with the individual without appreciating the fact that the individual is typically responding to what's happening around them. It makes it so easy for us to ostracize people, think because we're blaming them, it's their fault. But the environment, a lot of the reasons why this can be messed up is because of what's happening outside of the person. For African communities to deal with mental health, we have to actually look for those environmental cues which are causing those neurochemical imbalances that results in depression, anxiety, OCD, etc.
Something like poverty, or like acting out because of poverty, is something that I think a lot of African countries will have to deal with and confront. And also advancing in their mental health sectors, advancing their science would help them deal with it. So obviously we're saying that the West can deal with mental health much better, but that's because they're developed nations. They have the resources to do so.
And at the same time, if it's not important to them, even if they are taking advancements in like medicine, they're not going to prioritize mental health if it's not important to them. So is it for us, like as a diaspora to like go back and educate our parents, like where do the solutions lie, because it's tradition, you know what I mean?
For me, I think it's raising awareness. Once you hear one person hear your story, you're like, I can relate to that, I have that too, that can spread, right? So it becomes common, it becomes something that isn't taboo.
I think an eradication of religion will help.
No! Okay, wait. Down!
I wasn't ready!
Before we get there, just because we touched on it briefly, discipline. I am quite grateful that I was disciplined, but I still think there's a line.
I think there's like other stuff.
Stoop.
Like, squat, do 100 squats.
I'll tell you why I don't think that physicality should be a means of discipline. Unless it's for like, training, doing some 100 meters or whatever. That's different. But in terms of physical beating. Now, it worked effectively with me. I feel like I'm a disciplined person. But the reason why I don't believe that physical discipline is the way forward is because I've realised that having a rational discourse with someone better helps them to understand where they went wrong.
Including a 4-year-old?
Truth.
I think that you need to train them to have that rational discourse. So if you can't have that rational discourse with the child, despite it being, I know, difficult at the younger, it means that you're lacking in an area of communication, and that might actually be the reason why their behaviour is actually bad. But yeah, I feel like rational discourse helps them to better understand where and what they've done as wrong.
What about a mixture of the
That's number
two?
one.
What you said about communication is quite pertinent, because I bring my brother back to this conversation because I just think the difference is just quite funny. I feel like I had to kind of raise him a little bit myself. Like if it wasn't for me, who knows what the boy would be right now. But anyway, I try to explain things like you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do that, you're not supposed to put your hand in the fire, and you're not understanding. And I feel like as a child you're like, why not? And then you put your hand in the fire and you get burnt. So I feel like sometimes you kind of need like
Exactly.
No,
you
I
need like a
agree with that.
physical
I agree. I was a parent
reason
maybe
why
back
not
when
to
I
do
was a kid.
something.
I agree with you to some extent. One thing I don't agree with you is if you talk to people that are very disciplined and very successful, that are usually second generation immigrants, and they go, oh, I would like, will you be? And they go, yes, and they go, thank God for it. Because of that discipline, they were able to move forward. Now, I agree there's a combination of both, but maybe there is a place for discipline, that kind of hardcore discipline, that will be able to propel someone forward.
South African parents, yeah, when they're smacking their child, it's not because the child's done something wrong. It's because they're pissed.
They're having a bad day at the office.
And they're just like, see, I haven't watched the clip, and they're just going in.
Listen,
I'm like,
because like, you flashback.
Because no, but like seriously, because like I think like some parents are just like, I'd like to think my parents weren't slapping me from a place of anger, who knows? But like some parents are literally just letting it all out. I do think you can smack a child if you want to. Something in me I just couldn't do it.
Personally,
So that's why I'd rather just like kneel down.
That's me.
when I say having a rational discourse with the child, I understand that age can be a limiting factor. With that appreciation, yes.
Philosophizing.
Being practical, being pragmatic would tell me that yes, sometimes physical discipline may compensate for that lack of ability to have that conversation. But it comes down to the nature of which you want to physically discipline them. Now, you touched that point excellently. You do not have to result in snacking, etc. I think a child is going to learn more from writing lines because it's an inconvenience.
I wouldn't say more, but on par on the same kind of level without having.
It's
like,
worse.
Exactly.
Because you get smacked, maybe you cry and then you
You're
have
just
that
like-
sleep.
It's
that
like-
nice
You cry and then you
Because
go.
you like write this like 400 times or something. You get to like 50, 60 and you're like, it was legit not worth it. Whatever I did, or you know that second of like trying to pipe up to your mum or whatever, it just wasn't worth it. And then by the time I got old enough, I was just like, what are you doing?
You want to kill me? I remember the first time my mum slapped me and I looked straight at her and like, there was no water in my eyes and it just made her angrier. So just my parents, like my dad grew up here and like his discipline was kind of like he'd take away my phone and stuff like that. In terms of discipline, I'm still glad I got that balance.
I think what Timmy is saying that you need that rationale, I think that definitely is important and it opens up possibilities for you to open up to your parents later in life. When you don't have that, when your parents do not know how to speak to you on a level, and then it gets to a point where they need to speak to you on a level, it's going to be alien.
And that relates to mental health.
Yeah, exactly.
He does.
Do you think African parents want to be able to speak to their kids on that level? Because some
don't.
Because some don't.
Some legit don't.
Yeah, like what's that phrase? Children should be seen and
Seen,
not
not
heard.
heard, yeah,
Boom. Yeah, there we go. So have you not heard that phrase?
I have heard the phrase.
Yeah, even I've heard that phrase.
Yeah.
And so some parents don't want to talk about religion or they don't want to philosophize. They don't want to talk about this. They just want to just shut up and go about your life. You know.
I saw this video of a dad and his child talking, his son. I think the son had gone to jail or something, and this was like the first time they had spoken about
He
it.
needed more PTs.
Yeah, it was just amazing to see the different viewpoints. I'm sure there are cases where parents just don't want to talk to their children, but it's hard for me to believe that you've like raised a child and that's it.
I don't think that's coming from a bad place. I think it's just what they know, and that's what they think
Everyone shows love
is
differently.
how it should be.
But do you think that maybe it gets to the point where because the child has like not understood their father or their mother for so long, it's like they begin to kind of resent, and then that's why they don't talk. When the parent wants to talk, maybe it's because they want to talk when they're adults because then they're on the same level field. But by the time it's gone in there, it's too late.
The foundation hasn't been built.
Yeah.
Too late, dude. That's a really good point.
Another thing I would is probably the reduction of religion.
This guy wants it.
I feel like that was a perfect point to end on and get into religion.
So
Against Christ.
I don't have anything against Christ. I don't have anything against Muhammad. I don't have anything against particular religion. I have a thing
Put any point
against the way religion is given to people.
do you want to elaborate?
Was given.
Yeah, i.e.
So every Abrahamic religion was used to control.
What's an Abrahamic religion? I'm down. I do philosophy.
Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Yeah. So they were all given to, especially black people, as a way of controlling them, and it's still controlling them today.
You think?
I saw a statistic.
I
I saw a very shocking statistic. Out of the world's most oppressed communities, the black community, and this is a very dangerous point, but the black community is one of the few ones which has persisted with a religion that its oppressor has used to oppress them.
Wait, go again? Go again.
Out of a majority of oppressed communities, the black community, African community, has persisted believing or practicing religions which the oppressor has used to inflict their oppression on them.
I just want to know how that can happen. Like, why, as a people, are we so attached to it and sort of I don't get it.
I think part of it might come to hope. Yeah. A lot of times when you're in impoverished, environments, or it's always nice to have something, to cling on to something that, there's more out there. So maybe I'm suffering now, but when I die, I'm going to go to heaven, for example.
Yeah. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. No. But the issue that we have with that is that should that be a justification for your complete belief?
But my issue with that is that there are people out here who are banking on that. And when I say banking, I literally mean banking. Like, we're taking money off people's hope, which I think is very, very immoral. And there's a whole industry out there, isn't there?
What's that guy's name in America with the mega church? Now, I'm sure he's impacted many people's lives in very good ways. But that doesn't mean that you cannot be wealthy and be religious and Christian, because you can, most definitely. And I don't think that the Bible asks anyone to neglect wealth.
There is a passage that actually, the
love of money,
and it's the fitting a needle of a camel's head.
It's hard to go to heaven and be rich, basically.
There are some passages that do say if you're wealthy, you cannot go to heaven.
Exactly. But I don't think that's what it's trying to say. I think it's saying it's harder. A camel to enter the eye of the needle than a rich man to go to heaven. Yeah, and also apparently there was somewhere called the eye of the needle. This is what I heard. It was hard for camels to enter it, but they actually could enter it. It was just hard. I don't know.
The point of what I was saying is that there's, to some extent, some could argue that there's a slight contradiction in having such a high degree of wealth and, giving a message to people who are very poor.
And it's sad that, because I feel like there are statistics that show that maybe the poor you are, or the higher church attendance or something like that, you're literally banking on people who are poor. You're getting
a private jet.
Can we not do names? Can we actually not do names, please?
I get there's a moral issue. Is it completely wrong? No, because people are willing to give them money for it, right? So they're not literally grabbing the money from their pockets, but people are being, I'm trusting you.
You're taking advantage.
But is that a fault of religion? No, everything comes back to the fault of the person. Why? Because we're all sinners.
That's a great point.
We do things wrong, right?
It's not necessarily a fault of the religion.
No, it's not.
So it's okay if I touch on these 2 points. So you guys were talking about how certain pastors that were African had jets and were also pastors, obviously. And you said why? I completely and utterly disagree with you, because I feel like if a man is able to build his wealth, so let's say he does that through, I don't know, impacting people in this way, and then he also wants to be able to inspire people, he can give back. It doesn't have to be one or the other. For example, I know this is completely unrelated to African people, but please just bear with me. Bill Gates. Bill Gates is super wealthy, but Bill Gates impacts so many people.
I love that man.
So many people that to say, oh, he's rich, this, that, the other, makes no sense to me.
My man's a full-time pastor.
I completely agree with Dan's point, and I think that the problem comes because realistically there probably are pastors out there who are taking people's wealth.
Private jet?
Can I please talk? Oh my god. There are people out there who are taking people's wealth in immoral ways, but I don't feel that could discount the people who are, they've built industry, and they're if you're the one you're talking about, there's so many parishes there and stuff like that, and his argument could be that he has to travel a lot. He has to travel a lot, and so that's helping him spread God's word, that's helping him spread love. But I think where the problem comes is when you're kind of banking on
it's the
when it's the exploitation, exactly.
So okay, for one, I just can't understand, genuinely can't understand why church money would go towards you renting a private jet or whatever. He has a private jet basically, and
I think
we all know.
I just don't think that's an appropriate use of church funds. That's just one thing.
You're not entitled to that money because that's his job.
That's his job.
And that's fair enough. And I've actually had this conversation with my parents before. I'm they're actually more on my side. What they think is a lot of the time in churches, people taking in the money are the same people who are doing the actual sermons and the pastors. What really should happen is there should actually be an external group who dictates how much the pastor earns. The pastor doesn't have to be suffering it is an important job. Yeah. But I mean, some of it is, it's just greed.
So I could just counter that. The church I grew up in is a sub of the guy that he's talking about, and every year there is a booklet printed out to basically say where all the funds are going. So this is what's come in and this is where it's gone. And I think that's good, like that transparency. Transparency in anything is good because there is information asymmetry.
Do you trust them?
What?
I do. Definitely not a one-size-fits-all because let's not lie and say there are people who are exploiting off this information asymmetry. But that's what I'm just saying, just to be dangerous to kind of like blacklist a whole
Hashtag not all pastors.
Can I please counter your point?
Yeah, go
Counter your point after.
Okay. Let's just take Christianity, let's take these pastors, and let's take it from a different business perspective. Yeah? Okay, so if you have a motivational speaker or you have someone that likes to help people move forward, and you have people that sit down with people and say, look, this is what we're going to do to improve your life, this is what I'm going to do with you, I'm going to work with you, and he helps that person improve this person, yeah? That person can charge a lot of money for that service, can they not?
True.
Yeah? So let's take Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a great speaker, who will help people move forward, and he can charge a lot, he can charge a really high premium for that, yeah? Because what he is doing is helping people improve their lives. That's what he's doing. He's changing lives, yes? A pastor can do exactly the same thing. Why is it now that there's Christianity involved, he cannot charge a premium?
In the case of Gary Vaynerchuk,
Yeah.
it's very clear. There's this service.
Oh,
You pay
okay,
for
I
it.
see.
You need to understand the context around African churches because you're applying a general business-minded, I don't blame you, you're applying a very general business-orientated mindset to a context which is very difficult to apply it to. African churches, because of the corruption, because of the exploitation of people's naivety, and I hate to use that word, they have been profiting. Now that is a serious problem.
All I'll say is this: like, it's not even just in the African churches. Any generally just religious leaders, you don't understand the amount of power they hold. It's ridiculous. Like, it is ridiculous. So when you see that power being abused, it's really not right. You think about the Catholic Church, the amount of things that have come out in there. I mean,
And so this is why, personally, I have this constant tension with, particularly within the Black African community, about religious leaders having such a massive impact on the livelihoods of Africans.
It's because they are literally interpreting God's word, and these people are they're believing God. So that, and if this is what's between them and God.
I have 2 points. Who gives the power to the pastors or the leaders? It's the congregation.
Is it?
And
It's not the
a
people?
lot.
The congregation of people.
The people.
Oh.
It's because of this kind of pastor worshipping that is rife in a lot of African churches, that when there is an immoral pastor, you're I can't say that word really, sorry, I can't say that word. Pastor, I don't know. I feel oh, you think, okay, well, if I do something, God's going to hear me because this is as Waz was saying, this is the link between me and God. And to go back to history, there was a church in South Africa during the apartheid, which justified the apartheid, saying that God separated day from night, justifying that that's separating blacks from whites. And then also in 12 Years a Slave, the moment when the guy's reading bits of the Bible to them and obviously taking it out of context and stuff like that. Going back to Timmy's earlier point about why we are why out of all the oppressed communities we are the ones that bank on it, I think you have to also acknowledge that there is this kind of Western glorification or glorification of Western countries and Westernization present in Africa. For example, in Nigeria, they favour the white man, and there's whether that's still having a colonization mentality. It's unfortunate, but that can lead to why.
Can you expand on this? Because I've never heard of this. I mean, it's a little bit in the Caribbean. In St. Lucia, if you're from the West and you're from England, they're going to treat you a little bit better. But I didn't know it was in Africa too.
Yeah.
I know AJ will develop this point a little bit more. Religion has been used as an opium for the masses, and I'm quoting Karl Marx there.
Checky.
And in this case, where if I was explaining, it was used to justify apartheid, and in slavery, it has been used to keep people oppressed.
So I think you said it before we were talking, what was it, a means of social control, right? I mean, religion does have its benefits. I think there are some good things you can take out from religion. But the thing with religion for me is that generally it relies on a big amount of trust to whoever the religious leader is. And I think, what is it? Was it power corrupts and You know the saying, I've f***ed it up, whatever. but like essentially, I can't trust people that with that kind of power. So like you say that it's not really the religion, it's a person in control. But
it is, right?
Yeah.
So it's for you to then I am a religious person because I think the benefits outweigh the costs. But this is all subjective, right?
Yes.
So it's like whatever your beliefs are and whatever you weigh greater than others, that's what is going to lead to your decision.
I'm not talking about one's personal religion. I'm talking about like
Religion.
a big institution, like religious leaders, pastors, imams, whatever. Like they hold such power over their congregation. Yeah. Yeah, there will be some good religious leaders, but there will also be a lot of bad ones. And I just think that the people who are under the bad ones are like, you know.
Do you mind if I you sure? Yeah. So, and actually, you sure?
I don't know. If you don't want to speak,
I do, but I just don't know if you want to speak.
If you want to speak, then I'll give you the time to speak. But I really want to speak, but I think we're all talking about what happened 20 minutes ago.
No, because here's the thing, there's two.
Oh my god.
Oh, sorry. It happens to everyone. You just have to. You haven't said, "Oh my God" to anyone. You just said it to me.
Because it's only happened. Somebody only shouted
Jesus
over
Christ,
me.
guys.
That's a lie.
Then
Essentially, the point I was going to make is that I do think religion is very, very, very problematic. And that's why I think that anyone, your churchgoer, your mosque goer, etc., I think you need to have your own, do your own research, have your own personal experience. Don't just take because at the end of the day, they're people too. So don't just take what they say as gospel. Like if you want to properly endeavour into a faith and build a relationship, you have to find your own interpretations.
I just put in an interesting light on the religion using to indoctrinate. So Nat Turner, he used the Bible to inspire a revolution amongst slaves. So he used the Bible, he used specific passages in the Bible to rile up the slaves basically and get them on his side to revolt. So he is using it to his advantage and to push his agenda, but it's a positive agenda. And I think that some pastors, their agenda might be to spread love.
I was going to say, I see a lot of parallels between religion and politics, but politics still exists and we'll always have politics. Why? Because we need it, right, to structure society. Because I see quite a lot of similarities between that. Religion will always be that. And yes, you want people to be individual and think before they do things, but in the same light, you're going to have followers. So it's kind of like, it is a kind of illness of religion. Yeah, I completely take all your points and see that there are people that exploit it, and there will always be people that exploit it. There is always an incentive to cheat, like Game Theory, Prison's Dilemma. Read about it.
Hey, that's equilibrium. Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think that the problem with politics, religion, and even maybe feminism is when you stray from the ethos. And so I go back and say that the Abrahamic religion, a lot of it is founded on love, but when people kind of get involved because people are naturally selfish and we're naturally corrupt in our own ways, and we get involved and we twist it, something that was actually created to kind of be beautiful and to give people hope and to have a positive impact on society. Like feminism, some people say, oh, I'm not a feminist because there are feminists out there saying let's kill all men, but that's not actually feminism. And so even if they're doing it in the name of feminism, it's not feminism, it's not what it was founded on. So I think that applies to politics and it applies to religion as well.
Who are we to say that they're wrong in the way that they've used the religion? Because religion is in and of itself, and there are people who would contest this point, but it's subjective. So your interpretation is very much subjective. So if you want to use use a passage as a foundation for you to build on something relating to feminism, as you say, or something, then to some extent we cannot, because of the subjectivity of religion, we cannot say that they're wrong for doing so.
At the same time though, I still believe in this kind of idea of what is morally wrong and what's morally right. If you're killing people in the name of religion, I don't think you could possibly be doing that in a religion that is founded on love.
And a lot of what you said is a passage, and that's what people do. They'll take a line, forget the context, forget the story, forget everything. They'll take that one line and then use that and motivate that for their actions, and that's my issue with it.
On both of those points, I think you're right to an extent. I don't think to say that Christianity is completely and utterly founded upon love, because I think there's passages in the Bible which no interpretation, it's hateful, and I'm not going to quote passages, but they're passages that are homophobic in nature, they're passages that are racist in nature, sex in nature, Paul, for example, he said and did some things that were a bit rogue. So, yes, a lot of it is loving, especially the New Testament, like crazy.
Yeah.
But to say that there aren't hateful things in it and to say that it's all loving, I don't think is right.
But what Nadine said in context of that sort of social situation, of course, obviously it's inherently wrong for women to be placed under, for black people to be placed under, for gay people to be placed under. But in that context of that society, it was love amongst brothers, amongst men, and that's probably what the Bible promotes. So in context, can we not say that?
I think no. A lot of it can be taken in context, but some of it is so outright hateful that to say context makes no sense to me. I'm not going to be that guy and start quoting passages, but some of it, there's no way to look at it as it's black and white.
I think it goes back to Nadine's point about, well, for her and for me too, about the pros outweigh the cons. So like, I understand that, you know, people have this kind of you can't pick and choose mentality, and I agree, and that's why to some extent, that's why I say I'm not religious, because I am completely ignoring all those things. But for me, Jesus, like, I think was an amazing guy, and I say it today, I guess maybe I can't really make this statement because I'm not Jesus, but I think that, like, based on who he hung out with the rejects of society, and so I apply that to like the rejects now, and I think that if he was alive right now, like, he would be like hanging out with gay people, he would be doing that. That's why, like, I'm a follower of Jesus.
Theology is a very hotly debated thing. Is the Bible divinely inspired? That is to say, is the complete word of God, or are there human nuances? Fundamentalists will say that the Bible is the complete truth. It's God's word. It's in where it can't be wrong. Inedible.
I believe if you...
Not edible.
You can't eat it.
That's it, you can't eat the Bible.
Not fallible, so infallible. Yeah.
If you are a fundamentalist, or if you are a... There's just so many problems, because I think if you're going to take Christianity as a whole and maybe eat it, then you've got to like eat all aspects of it. And so I think it's very dangerous to like read the Bible on your own. If it's supposed to be a divine book, then pray to that divine source and read it with his guidance, because we are all human. Like, so the people who were formed in the Bible were human. Like, so there's no human that is perfect. There's even that in the Bible. So
in Islam, the perfect human being is Muhammad. So
Not all Muslims think that.
But not all Christians think the same as well.
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Exactly what we're saying, right?
Just to bring back what we're talking about it being toxic, I would say that the toxicities come where it is bent away from the truth, or like it's or people are being exploited and stuff like that, because obviously that is not right. And I think that the toxicities do come from like maybe worshipping pastors or like putting them like on a higher esteem. But yeah, we've spoken about so much today. We started with mental health, we touched on discipline, and now we've ended on religion, which obviously is such a sensitive topic, and everyone has so much to say about it. Please feel free to comment respectfully on what you think. Obviously, we acknowledge that there are positives to tradition, and there are positives to culture, and there are positives to religion, and all of that, which I think we did touch on in this with Nat Turner, with faith, and just stuff like that. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you haven't been offended by anything. And yeah, stick around and feel free to catch up with the past classroom convos. Feel free to watch me, myself, and Itha videos as well.
So yeah, I've created a sports and fitness apparel. So this is just one of the first prototype t-shirts. So the whole idea is basically proving to people that they can reach their fitness goals. So that's where the steel come from. So the slogan is, we are all made of steel. What that slogan is basically trying to prove is that there's people that have goals. In other words, they want to lose 30 pounds and they don't think they can do it. And I want my company to be able to prove to them that it's totally possible.
Get it quick, call us a lick. I was inbred lies, now there's diamonds on my wrist. Rabbi wants to get the pipe, so I take her to the nist. And I just might change her life when I'm giving her the biz. Get it fast, pipe your